Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. We're on Season 19, Killer Pairs, where we're going to cover people who work together to murder. It could be family members, people involved in relationships, or just a couple of friends out doing some murdering. If you're entertained by these videos, hit like, subscribe, or leave me a comment. You can also check out my other channel, Somewhere Sinister, that's a little more history related. There's links in the description. Ian Brady had become obsessed with death early on. His dark desires were hidden from everyone for many years until he met Myra Hindley. When he realized that she was in love with him and would do anything to make him happy, he molded her into the perfect accomplice to carry out the evil deeds he had always dreamed about. This is Monsters. Ian Duncan Stewart was born on January 2, 1938 in Glasgow, Scotland. His mother, Maggie Stewart, who went by Peggy, had him on her own as his father had died 3 months before his birth. Peggy worked as a waitress at a tea room but struggled to work full-time and also care for a newborn. Peggy was not on good terms with her family, so she was pretty much alone in her effort to care for herself and a child. She put an ad in a store window for someone to care for the baby, and she eventually made an arrangement with John and Jeannie Sloan to care for Ian. He would go and live with them, and she would pay them £1 a week out of her £3 per week salary. She was able to return to work full-time and then got a new job as a machine operator at a manufacturing plant, which allowed her to pay extra for clothing and take him out on the weekends. The Sloans had a son and 2 daughters of their own, and bringing in another child didn't seem like a burden. They did their best to provide Ian with a loving home, but he remained emotionally distant, rarely participating in family activities. In 1944, Peggy was dating a man named Peter who was given the opportunity to emigrate to Australia and wanted her to go with him. When she asked Ian if he wanted to go, he declined, so Peter moved away and Peggy stayed in Scotland to be near her son. She would still see him from time to time, but it would be many years before Ian would go back to live with his mother. He would eventually grow to believe that the Sloans were his biological parents, which he would continue believing until he was 16. Peggy would eventually meet Patrick Brady in 1947, and the couple moved to Manchester together a year later. They got married in 1950. As a child, Ian exhibited troubling behavior. His classmates later reported disturbing incidents, including instances where he tied up a boy and set him on fire during a game. The boy survived. He also boasted about burying a cat alive, hinting at his developing sadistic tendencies. In his teenage years, Ian became increasingly solitary, developing unusual hobbies such as collecting Nazi memorabilia and amassing pornography. One student would later recall, quote, "He read all kinds of books about Nazis and never stopped talking about them. Even when we were playing war games, he made a great point of being a German. When Ian used to shout, 'Sieg Heil,' and give the Nazi salute, people would laugh." Despite being intellectually inclined, reading Dostoevsky at 15, Ian struggled academically and left school without qualifications. As a teen, Ian started spending time in a graveyard carrying out bizarre experiments with animals. Ian began breaking and entering when he was a teen. He and 5 other boys became known as the Pollock Gang. They would break into houses under construction and steal tools, and eventually graduated to breaking into occupied houses. They would break into multiple houses a night, and after showing off their loot at school, a fellow student turned them in. All 6 of the Pollock Gang were sentenced to 2 years of probation. Ian was angry about being ratted out and decided to take revenge on the boy who had turned them in. Ian got the boy alone and sexually assaulted him. Then the gang got caught stealing again and was reprimanded, but there was no other action taken to punish them. Ian dropped out of school in 1953 and began working at a butcher shop, then as a shipbuilder in Glasgow. That lasted until he was charged with breaking and entering again, and his punishment was that he agreed to leave Scotland and went to live with his mother in Manchester, England. His birth mother. He had suspected that Peggy was his real mother, but once he moved in with her and Patrick, she confirmed that it was true. From there, Ian took his stepfather's name and the two began working together at a local market. It seemed that Ian was adjusting well to his new life back with his mother, but in reality, he was still sneaking around and committing crimes. He and a truck driver stole some lead seals from the market's warehouse and attempted to sell them to a scrapyard. They were arrested for petty larceny as a servant, meaning they stole from their employer. The truck driver was given a fine, but Ian requested a trial. He spent 3 months in prison awaiting trial, and while there, he learned as much as he could from other inmates. He learned how other criminals operated and who to contact when he was free once again. He also took classes in accounting and tool-making just to pass the time. At his trial, he was found guilty and ordered to undergo Borstal training, which is like a juvenile detention facility. In the Borstal, Ian worked in the kitchen where he started brewing alcohol using methylated spirits, surgical spirit, lemon, and sugar. He made so much money selling the booze that he had other inmates hold some of his money just in case he was searched. That way, he wouldn't lose it all. Then he started running books on cards, dogs, and horses. Ian was released on November 14, 1957 and returned to Manchester to live with his mother and stepfather. He was bitter about having been sent to prison and made the decision that he was not going to go back to a regular job. He would later say that he thought, quote, "If they think I'm a criminal, I'll be a proper criminal." From there, he began scouting banks and department stores and making notes on when large deposits were made. Eventually, he and some associates pulled a job and split £250. That would be like £5,000 today. Ian did end up getting a job as a laborer at a brewery, but only as a means of explaining where his money came from. It was that money that Ian started spending on some rather weird purchases. He began ordering records through the mail of German marching music, Adolf Hitler's speeches, and recordings from the Nuremberg trials. He would play the records as loud as he could, and neighbors would recall hearing the music being played by the young man who was normally so shy and quiet. It was a strange contrast. Ian spent the next few years living in his own world at his mother's house, planning robberies and listening to unusual records. Myra Hindley was born on July 23, 1942 in Manchester, England. Her mother, Nellie Hindley, took herself to the hospital on the bus when she went into labor as Myra's father was off fighting in World War II. Myra and her mother lived for the first few years with Nellie's mother, brother, and sister-in-law. After serving in North Africa, Cyprus, and Italy, Bob Hindley returned from the war in 1945. He went back to work for the locomotive manufacturer he worked for before the war, but was never the same. He struggled with a normal domestic life and spent much of his time outside of work at the pub. Those evenings would often end with Bob getting completely hammered and starting a fight, only to have Nellie show up and drag him home. After a while, Nellie gave up and would just send Myra to retrieve her father's coat. The drinking would also lead to many fights at home that would cause Bob to beat Nellie. The Hindleys moved into their own house, but it was almost unlivable. The bedroom that was supposed to be Myra's leaked and the floorboards weren't safe to walk on, so the girl slept in her parents' room. After Nellie gave birth to another daughter, she began to lose her patience with Myra more often and would end up beating her. Myra would grow up to be fairly confrontational and would talk back to her father, who would beat her as well. Eventually, Myra was sent to live with her grandmother, who only lived around the corner. Myra would still go to her parents' house every day for dinner and to play with her sister. It was in 1950 that Bob decided that Myra needed to learn to stick up for herself. He began teaching her how to throw punches and block the punches directed toward her. The first time she came home and told her father about a boy who had scratched her face, he sent her back outside and told her she needed to punch him or else he was going to whip her with his belt. She found the boy and punched him multiple times until he was on the ground. Another time, a local boy was calling her name, so she wrestled him to the ground and started punching him until her grandmother came and pulled her away. Her father's guidance instilled in her a tough, confrontational attitude, shaping her into a resilient but aggressive individual. That confrontational attitude was also used to defend her little sister, Maureen. Myra would later tell a story about a girl she learned was bullying Maureen. After seeing the girl and chasing her across a field, Myra said, quote, "She glimpsed me pelting across and started running like the clappers, but I grabbed her before she had time to lock herself in her backyard and pasted hell out of her. Her brother, who was in my class, came out, scared though I was of him, for he was the bigger bully. I went for him before he came for me. To my amazement, to say nothing of relief, he threw his sister and himself into the backyard and bolted the door. Returning home filthy and scruffy, I got yelled at by Graham and clouded by Mom, who, when Maureen explained, was full of contrition but bristling with indignation. I stole without compunction 2 of my mother's park drives and decided to run away from home. Until about 10, when I returned because I was starving hungry." Park drives were a brand of cigarette. As a teenager, Myra did her fair share of shoplifting with other kids in her friend group. They would steal candy and other food items. One time, Myra claimed she stole some Christmas cards because she was waiting to pay for them but kept getting ignored, so she just ran out with them. Otherwise, Myra could have been considered a relatively normal teenager. She loved babysitting and spending time with friends. She played sports and went swimming, roller skating, and dancing. In June of 1957, a friend named Michael Higgins asked Myra if she wanted to go swimming down at a local reservoir, but she already had plans. Michael and 2 other boys went off to swim, and at some point, Michael started thrashing around in the water. One of the other boys tried to help him, but he only got pulled under the surface by a panicking Michael. The other boy freed himself and resurfaced, but Michael never did. Police and firefighters arrived and looked for Michael, but it wasn't until almost 7 p.m. that divers finally recovered his body. Later that day, when Myra learned about what had happened, she blamed herself for not being there. She was a strong swimmer and thought that she would have been able to save her friend. It's believed that the death affected her the rest of her life. It was determined that Michael had gotten a cramp and was not able to stay above water. After the death, Myra started attending church and eventually decided she wanted to become a practicing Catholic. At her first communion, her aunt and uncle would give her a prayer book that would stay with her and end up becoming an important piece of evidence years later. On Myra's 17th birthday, she got engaged to a young man named Ronnie Sinclair, who she had started dating the previous year. She would later explain that she knew it was expected for her to get married and have children. Ronnie was a nice guy and had a full-time job, which was already above and beyond what most girls in the area could hope for. She had aspirations of a career of her own, but it was something that was not considered to be attainable at the time. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley's paths crossed in January of 1961 at Millwards, a chemical distribution company in Gorton. Ian, then 23, was working as a stock clerk, while 18-year-old Myra had just started as a typist. Myra quickly became infatuated with Ian, drawn to his aloof demeanor and apparent sophistication. A big part of Myra's job was to type up stock lists that were dictated by Ian. When she turned 19, she realized that she wanted to pursue a relationship with her coworker and broke off her engagement with Ronnie. Their relationship developed slowly at first. Myra kept a diary documenting her growing obsession with Ian. The problem was, Ian didn't seem to show any interest in her. He was friendly but never revealed anything personal about himself. She knew everything about Ian, including the fact that he was interested in literature, so she went to the library and checked out some books that she thought would get his attention. She started reading the books on her lunch break, and it worked. He started asking her about the books and then about other things like music and hobbies. On December 22, 1961, Myra and Ian attended a Christmas party for their employer where they drank and danced. After walking Myra home at the end of the evening, he finally asked her on a date to the cinema. He began turning her away from her faith almost immediately. He told her that religion was created to keep working people in their place and that religious people were weak. When she told him about her friend Michael's death, he asked, quote, "If God was good, why did he let Michael die?" It was a question that Myra couldn't answer, and it was effective in shaking her faith, allowing Ian to shape her with his own views. Their dates followed a disturbing pattern. After watching X-rated films, they would return to Myra's house and drink German wine. Ian introduced Myra to Nazi literature and accounts of atrocities, which they would read aloud to each other during work breaks. Myra, eager to please Ian, began to emulate an Aryan ideal, bleaching her hair blonde and wearing thick red lipstick. As their relationship intensified, so did their shared descent into darkness. Ian's influence over Myra grew stronger, and she later described him as her god. Ian eventually opened up to Myra about his violent sexual fantasies. They began engaging in rough sex, and Ian would whip Myra. The consensual violence between them wasn't enough, though. They began searching for other people to inflict violence upon. They began looking through the newspaper for reports of animal cruelty. At the time, anyone convicted of a crime had their address printed in the paper, and the couple would go to the perpetrator's house and dish out their own punishment. Sometimes that would only be a brick through the window, but if they were able to catch them outside, they would grab them from behind and give them a beating. After months of escalating violence and manipulation, Ian was ready to enlist Myra to help her carry out his ultimate fantasy. According to Myra, he had her read a book called Compulsion, which was about the crime carried out by Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb. I did an episode about that case last week, and you can check it out at the link in the description. Leopold and Loeb believed they were going to carry out the perfect crime, but made a number of mistakes that resulted in their capture within days. Ian told Myra that he could do it better and told her they were going to carry out the perfect murder. From there, the couple began preparing for their murder. They would ride his motorcycle out to Saddleworth Moor, and Ian would carry Myra up the hill, practicing carrying a body to its final resting place. They wrote out a plan for committing murders and not getting caught. The list of principles included having no connection to the place of the murder, leaving no footprints, tire tracks, hairs, or fingerprints. The clothes they wore during the murder would be burned, and their vehicle would be thoroughly cleaned before and after each murder. They gained access to an acquaintance's van to use to carry out the murder. As an added bonus, the van wasn't in either of their names and would be harder to trace back to them. Some of Myra's later accounts of her relationship with Ian painted herself as having been forced into participating, but other accounts say she was more than willing and even talked with Ian about killing Ronnie Sinclair at one point. Pauline Reed, a 16-year-old from Gorton, Manchester, became Ian and Myra's first victim on July 12, 1963. Myra took the van out and started looking for a victim. She saw Pauline, who she knew as the neighbor of her sister's fiancé, in a dress walking to a local dance. Myra rolled down her window and asked Pauline if she wanted a ride, which she accepted because she knew Myra and Maureen. Once in the van, Myra asked Pauline if she would help her look for a glove she had lost while out with her boyfriend. Pauline was happy to help. They drove to Saddleworth Moor and Ian arrived shortly after them. Once on the hill, Ian grabbed Pauline and Myra took off her clothes. They sexually assaulted the girl and then told her to put her clothes back on. According to Ian, Pauline knew she was going to be killed and tried to get away, but Myra caught her and punched her in the head before Ian killed her. Her throat had been slashed with such force that her spinal cord was severed. Then they buried her body on the hill. In all accounts of their crimes, Myra's story was always slightly different. In this case, she claimed that she waited in the van while Ian committed the sexual assault, murder, and burial on his own. After 4 months, Ian was desperate for another victim, so he and Myra found a 7-year-old boy named Tommy Radigan at a local park. Myra approached Tommy and asked if he was hungry, offering to bring him to her house and make him a sandwich. She promised to take him straight home afterward. Tommy agreed and followed the couple back to the house. Myra brought Tommy some food as promised, but after she left the room, he got nervous and escaped out of the window. The boy was able to run and hide, then made his way back home. Years later, Ian and Myra would initially deny they were responsible for the attempt, but Ian eventually came clean. On November 23, 1963, 12-year-old John Kilbride fell prey to the murderous couple. Myra approached John at Ashton Market, where he had been earning pocket money. She offered him a ride home, and on the way, she told John the same story about looking for a lost glove. They then took John to Saddleworth Moor. Once there, Ian and John walked toward the moor, and Myra drove away as Ian had previously told her to park the van somewhere else and then return 30 minutes later. It's believed that Ian strangled John and then sexually assaulted him, in that order. A few weeks later, Ian would take a photograph of Myra kneeling next to the boy's grave that would later be used by authorities to recover John's body. Keith Bennett, a 12-year-old boy, vanished on June 16, 1964, while walking to his grandmother's house in Longsight, Manchester. Myra lured him to her car by asking for help loading boxes. Ian and Myra drove Keith to Saddleworth Moor, where Ian sexually assaulted and murdered him. This case is another where Myra claimed that Ian acted alone, and Ian claimed that Myra was fully involved. Tragically, Keith's remains have never been found, despite extensive searches and appeals from his family. The youngest victim, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey, was abducted from a fairground on Boxing Day in 1964. Ian and Myra took her to their home, where they subjected her to unimaginable horrors. Myra's grandmother was out of the house for the day, so the couple had the place to themselves. They forced Leslie to pose for pornographic photographs and recorded her final moments on tape. The 16-minute-long recording, which captured Leslie's desperate pleas for mercy, was later played in court, shocking all who heard it. She was then sexually assaulted by both Ian and Myra before being strangled to death. They put the girl's body in the bath and washed her, then wrapped her in a sheet and hid her under a pile of clothes. Myra picked up her grandmother and gave her a ride back home. Then, the following morning, they drove out to the moor and buried Leslie's body near Pauline Reed's body. The final victim was 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer. Ian had become friends with Maureen's then-husband, David Smith. On October 6th, David had received a note that said he was behind on his rent and needed to pay it within a few days or else the landlord would take legal action. He brought that problem up when he was with Ian and Myra, and Ian suggested they, quote-unquote, roll a queer. That was a term that meant they were going to find a gay man to rob. They were considered a safer target at the time as they were less likely to report a crime to the police as homosexuality was illegal in the UK. David was no murderer, but he had committed his share of crimes and was all in on the plan. Later that evening, Ian met Edward at Manchester Central Station and invited him back to his home. He told Edward that Myra was his sister. It's never been confirmed if Edward was gay or not, but that was what Ian had always maintained. Once at their house, Ian attacked Edward with an axe, hitting him 17 times, and then strangling him with an electrical cord. That had happened while Myra's grandmother was upstairs sleeping, but Edward's screams woke her up and she called down the stairs, asking what was going on. Myra yelled up the stairs to go back to bed. David was horrified, but he knew that if he ran, Ian would catch him and not hesitate to kill him with the axe too. The three of them started cleaning up the house as there was blood everywhere. During the cleanup, they spent 3 hours scrubbing blood out of the carpet and furniture and picking up pieces of bone and brain. They wrapped the body in a sheet and plastic and put it in the spare bedroom. Then they came up with a plan for Myra and David to dispose of the body the following day. It was about 3 a.m. at that point, and David said he should probably go or else Maureen would get worried. They said goodbye, fully believing that David was on board with the murder and their plan to dispose of the body. Unfortunately for them, he was not. After David left, Myra remembered that a chain lock on the steering wheel of her car needed to be locked, so Ian went outside to take care of it. He had twisted his ankle during the attack on Edward, so he limped to the car, and as he bent down to grab the chain, his wallet fell out of his pocket. He picked it up and placed it on the dash of the car, locked the chain, then went back inside with his wallet still in the car. At the Smith home, Maureen was asleep when David returned, and he tried to sleep, but he ended up in the bathroom vomiting. Maureen woke up and saw blood on his clothes and worried he was hurt. He explained that he had watched Ian kill a man and that Myra was fully involved. He was afraid that they might be watching him, so they waited until morning, and at about 6 a.m. they went to the police. Police arrived at the house at 8:30, where Superintendent Bob Talbot, disguised as a bread delivery man, led a team to Ian and Myra's residence. David had told the authorities that Ian had guns in the house, so the superintendent posed as a delivery man in order to catch them off guard. After knocking on the door in disguise, he announced that he was the police superintendent and that they were going to search the house. They found Ian and Myra in the house, looking like they had just gotten out of bed. They found Myra's grandmother in one bedroom upstairs, and when they tried to look in the other bedroom, the door was locked. Myra tried to claim she left the key at work, but the police just said they'd kicked the door down. After relenting and giving them the key, they found the body of Edward Evans. In that bedroom, they also found the axe along with 2 loaded revolvers. Ian claimed that he and Edward had gotten into a fight the night before that had gotten out of hand. Yeah, really out of hand. That piece of fiction did not stop him from being arrested and taken into custody. Initially, Myra was not detained but insisted on accompanying Ian to the police station. Once there, Ian made a statement that read, quote, "I, Ian Brady, wish to make a statement. I want someone to write down what I say. I have been told that I need not say anything unless I wish to do so, and whatever I say may be given in evidence. Last night I met Eddie in Manchester. We were drinking, then we went home to Hattersley. We had an argument and we came to blows. After the first few blows, the situation was out of control. When the argument started, David was at the front door and Myra called him in. Eddie was on the floor by the living room door and David hit him with a stick and kicked him about 3 times. Eddie kicked me at the beginning on my ankle and there was a hatchet at the fireplace which I hit Eddie with. After that, the only noise Eddie made was gurgling. Then Dave and I began cleaning up the blood. The gurgling stopped, then we tied up the body, that is Dave and I and nobody else, and Dave and I carried it upstairs. We sat in the house till 3 or 4 in the morning, then we decided to get rid of the body in the morning or the next night." The search of their home yielded crucial evidence that hinted at a more extensive series of crimes. Police uncovered an old exercise book bearing the name John Kilbride, raising suspicions about the couple's involvement in other unsolved disappearances. That discovery prompted a broader investigation into missing children cases in the area. Inside Myra's car, they found Ian's wallet, and inside that they found a note where he outlined the plan for murdering Edward. As the investigation deepened, the true extent of Ian and Myra's crimes began to emerge. A thorough search of their residence led to the discovery of a prayer book that belonged to Myra. Inside that book, investigators found a left luggage ticket, which in turn led police to a locker at Manchester Central Station. Part of Ian's plan to not get caught for his crime included packing anything incriminating that he owned into a suitcase and leaving it in a locker at the train station the day before they committed a crime. He would then pick it up 2 weeks later, believing that by then they were in the clear. Inside the suitcase, they found disturbing items including sadistic gadgets, pornography, and photographs of Leslie Ann Downey bound and gagged in Myra's bedroom. Perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence was a tape recording capturing the voice of a young girl begging for her life, later identified as Leslie by her mother. That discovery solidified the case against Ian and Myra, linking them to multiple murders. Once the evidence was collected and analyzed, it was clear that Myra was involved in each crime to some degree, and she was placed under arrest on November 11th. On December 6th, Ian was charged with the murders of Edward Evans, John Kilbride, and Leslie Ann Downey. Myra faced charges for the murders of Edward and Leslie, as well as for harboring Ian with the knowledge of John's murder. The trial of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, which began on April 19, 1966, marked a significant moment in British criminal history. The proceedings, lasting 14 days, captivated the nation and drew intense media scrutiny. Over 150 journalists and 5 authors attended the trial, all aiming to satisfy the public's insatiable curiosity about the so-called Moores murders. The prosecution's case against Ian and Myra relied heavily on physical evidence and witness testimony. The most important evidence came from a suitcase found in the locker at the train station, the 16-minute audio recording of Leslie's final moments, a photograph showing Myra posing with her dog at what turned out to be John Kilbride's burial site, along with other photographs of the Moores found in the suitcase, which played a significant role in linking the couple to the murders. The testimony of David Smith, Myra's brother-in-law, proved crucial to the case. David had witnessed the murder of Edward Evans and subsequently alerted the authorities. His account of the events that transpired on the night of Edward's death was instrumental in unraveling the couple's crimes. Both Ian and Myra tried to claim that it was David who had committed the murder of Edward, but that just didn't make sense. Ian admitted to striking Edward with the axe, but he said he only hit him once and then David had killed him. Ian testified for 8 hours, and his arrogant attitude did not win over the jury. On May 6, 1966, after deliberating for just over 2 hours, the jury returned their verdict. Ian Brady was found guilty of the murders of John Kilbride, Leslie Ann Downey, and Edward Evans. Myra Hindley was convicted of the murders of Leslie and Edward, as well as being an accessory to the murder of John. Judge Fenton Atkinson sentenced Ian to 3 concurrent life sentences for what he described as, quote, 3 calculated, cruel, cold-blooded murders. Myra received 2 concurrent life sentences for 2 of the murders, plus an additional 7 years for being an accessory to 1 murder. The trial's conclusion marked the beginning of life imprisonment for both Ian and Myra. However, it was far from the end of the Moores murders saga. In the years that followed, investigators used the pictures they had found in the suitcase to search for other victims at Saddleworth Moor. They spent years searching but were never able to find more bodies. In 1985, Myra eventually helped the investigators look through the pictures and picked out some they should focus on, though she continued to deny any involvement in any murders. On December 16, 1986, Myra was taken out to the moor and helped identify possible burial sites, but no remains were uncovered. On February 10, 1987, Myra confessed to being involved in a total of 5 murders, though in those statements she claimed that she was never present for any of the actual murders. When investigators told Ian about Myra's confession, he finally gave them additional details about the locations of the remains. On July 1, 1987, Pauline Reed's remains were recovered in the area pointed out by Ian. At some point after that, Ian confessed to committing 5 other murders, but police couldn't match any of the details to any missing persons or unsolved crimes in the areas he described. Ian Brady's life behind bars was marked by controversy and mental health issues. In 1985, he was declared insane and transferred to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility. That move highlighted the complex nature of Ian's psychological state and the challenges of managing such a notorious offender within the prison system. Ian's time in custody was characterized by his persistent desire to end his life. In 1999, he began a hunger strike leading to a prolonged legal battle over his right to die. Staff at Ashworth Hospital in Liverpool resorted to force-feeding Ian through a tube to keep him alive. That situation raised ethical questions about the right of prisoners and the duties of medical professionals in such extreme cases. In a surprising turn of events, Ian authored a book titled The Gates of Janus, an analysis of serial murders. However, he was legally barred from receiving any profits from its publication abroad. That attempt at literary expression further complicated public perceptions of Ian and reignited discussions about the rights of convicted criminals to share their perspectives. Myra Hindley's life after conviction was marked by a series of legal battles and attempts to secure her release. Initially, she maintained that she had played a minor role in the killings, claiming Ian had manipulated and controlled her. However, that stance changed over time as Myra recognized that admitting guilt might be her only path to potential freedom. During her incarceration at High Point Prison in Suffolk, Myra underwent a significant personal transformation. She became a devout Roman Catholic and reportedly showed remorse for her victims. That change in her demeanor and beliefs became a central point in her appeals for release. Myra's case became a focal point in debates about life sentences and the possibility of rehabilitation. Despite her efforts, successive Home Secretaries maintained in her case life should mean life. That stance reflected the enduring public outrage over the Moores murders and the challenges of balancing justice with the potential for rehabilitation. The Moores murders case continued to evoke strong public reactions long after the initial convictions. Myra, in particular, became a symbol of evil in British society. Her police mugshot achieved iconic status, representing the dark underbelly of human nature. The enduring notoriety of the case was further exemplified by the controversy surrounding a portrait of Myra created by artist Marcus Harvey. The 13-foot by 10.5-foot or 4-meter by 3.2-meter monochrome portrait, made using stenciled children's handprints, sparked outrage when exhibited at the Royal Academy in London in 1997. The public's visceral reaction to the artwork demonstrated the lasting impact of the Moores murders on British collective memory. The search for Keith Bennett, the last undiscovered victim of Ian and Myra, has been a decades-long endeavor. Despite numerous attempts, Keith's remains have eluded investigators, leaving his family without closure. In 2002, police launched Operation Meta, using a U.S. reconnaissance satellite to detect disturbed soil in the area, but were again unsuccessful. In September of 2022, a glimmer of hope emerged when author Russell Edwards claimed to have found evidence of human remains on Saddleworth Moor. That led to a renewed search effort by Greater Manchester Police. The investigation involved forensic anthropologists examining potential samples of body tissue from the area. Drones were employed to survey the terrain and a forensic tent was erected at the site. However, despite initial optimism, the search concluded without success. Assistant Chief Constable Sarah Jackson stated, quote, "At this time there is no evidence of the presence of human remains." Keith's disappearance had a profound impact on his family, particularly his mother, Winnie Johnson. She dedicated her life to finding her son, even taking to the moor herself with a spade. Tragically, Winnie passed away in 2012 without ever knowing the location of Keith's remains. The emotional toll on Keith's surviving relatives continues. His brother, Alan Bennett, has expressed frustration with false leads and publicity-seeking claims. Following the recent unsuccessful search, Alan wrote on social media about the anguish, anger, hurt, and distress caused by unsubstantiated claims. Despite the setbacks, authorities remain committed to solving the case. Detective Chief Inspector Cheryl Hughes emphasized, quote, "The investigation into Keith's disappearance and murder has remained open since 1964 and it will not be closed until we have found the answers his family have deserved for so many years." The most recent search, while ultimately fruitless, demonstrated the ongoing dedication to resolving the case. GMP has stated that they will continue to respond to any credible information that might lead to finding Keith. That commitment underscores the enduring impact of the Moores murders case on British society and the criminal justice system. In 1980, Myra's sister Maureen suffered a brain hemorrhage and Myra was allowed to go see her in the hospital, but she arrived an hour after Maureen had died. Despite continually fighting to get a chance at parole, Myra ended up dying in prison of bronchial pneumonia on November 15, 2002. Ian never claimed to have wanted to be released from prison. He mainly wanted to die and continually fought for his right to starve himself to death. It's believed that he was able to seduce vulnerable underage boys for a few months in 1976 while housed at the hospital wing of HMP Strangeway. After concerns were raised about his unusual interest in any adolescent inmate, he was moved away from the boys. Ian died on May 15, 2017 of heart disease at Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital. This case highlights the dangers of a vulnerable person pairing up with a manipulative person. Evil gets multiplied and they end up working together to commit horrible crimes against the people in their community. It turns a situation with one monster into a pair of monsters. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.